Okay, so RNT, or reactive neuromuscular training. Reactive neuromuscular training is useful when addressing imbalances or improper movement patterns, whether it be a squat, lunge, hinge motion, pressing motion, pulling motion, whatever it is. This method is used to combat improper patterns that over time cause wear and tear on our bodies. So the idea is kind of counterintuitive, and I'll get into that here shortly. When we have imbalances or muscular imbalances, let's say comparing different sides of the body. If I'm lunging on one side versus the other side, and my patterning is different between sides, it could be that I've got muscular imbalances, so one side is weaker, but it can also be a mobility issue, that one side is just tighter or kind of impinged than the other, or it can be neurological. So it could be a neural pathway here that isn't firing a signal to the muscles that we need. So I'm going to use the lunge as my example for this exercise. Okay, so I've got a band here anchored to the squat rack. Now, reactive neuromuscular training, or RNT, is kind of a counterintuitive approach to creating this neural signal to fire the muscles in an efficient and proper way. For example, if I'm performing a lunge and I come down and my knee is caving in like that, if I've got excessive knee cave here, it could be a mobility issue. It could be that my glutes aren't firing enough to get the knee or keep the knee out over the toes. Or it could just be a learned movement pattern over the span of my lifetime where my brain just isn't turning on the glutes here. So in order to address that issue, you can use something like a band to provide some resistance, and it will really require your brain to turn on. It's a counterintuitive approach here. So if my knee's caving in, I'm going to use a band to pull my knee the direction that my knee is caving in. And it may not seem like that makes sense. However, with the band pulling, if I've got an external stimulus here, it's a lot easier for my brain to turn on my glutes and get my knee out over the toes. So the RNT lunge, what you're going to do is you're going to get a band. You can bring it up above the knee or just right below the knee. And what you'll do is get yourself into a lunge position, and you can start down on your knee if you want to. Because that way, starting on the knee, you can kind of go through your checkpoints, make sure that the spacing between your feet is good, and then make sure that you're braced here, you're in proper position with your upper body, kind of lean forward just a little bit with a slight hip hinge. So if my original problem is that my knee's caving in, I've got to pull against the band in order to keep the knee out as I go through the lunge, okay? So having that stimulus, pulling my knee the direction that it just naturally will go, is going to tell my brain to turn on the glutes, to kind of screw the hip into the ground and get the knee into a proper position where my glutes are engaged, because right here my glutes aren't engaged. Right here my glutes are engaged and I'm moving efficiently. So RNT is really an effective tool to use, especially to overcome improper movement patterns. Our lifestyles are predominantly sedentary, and a lot of us sit a lot of each and every day, and our minds are going to follow the path of least resistance. Our brains know movement patterns. It doesn't necessarily know individual muscle systems. So let's say you have an impingement or lack of mobility, or even if you get injured, your brain is going to automatically follow the path that's either less painful or most efficient. And it's kind of awesome. It's a survival mechanism, but day in and day out of following these less efficient movements, that's going to cause a lot of wear and tear on the body. And so it's time to wake up all of our muscles. A lot more RNT work to come at you, but we're starting today with a lunge.